All right, all right, all right. Take off my headphones here. I think the audio is okay. Let me make sure chat is working. Chat is working. Everybody's here. Let's get this party started. If I can move this around. Hopefully, if the restream stuff seems to be working out okay on both Twitter and YouTube. Lost my webcam for some reason, but that's okay. You don't need to see. Nobody needs to see my face. Let's be honest here. Let's be honest here. What's up, Blake, Karen, Brant? Anyone using Noster? You know, I tried to use Noster a bunch, and it's just kind of tough, honestly, just to log in and do everything, which is like me just complaining, but it's okay. It's okay. I want to like it. I want to use it, but I just haven't lately used Noster. Wick, if you guys want me to see anything, guys and gals, let me know. Bitcoin rainbow chart. Yeah, we can pull up the look into Bitcoin stuff, Bitcoin Magazine Pro, whatever it's called. But overall, we're doing good. I mean, we're pre-election, lots of chop. What's up, Fed? Lots and lots of chop. I hope this is, let me just make sure. This restream is kind of like lagging behind. Okay, now we're good. Yeah, it's just lots of chop. I mean, the technicals look okay. Nothing looks like bad, you know? We're above moving averages on Bitcoin. We're above the cloud. The cloud looks fine. We're a little overbought just based on where we've been in the range. But it's nothing crazy. You know, it's nothing like danger zone type stuff like we were in March. I would love to see any sort of consolidation up here for the next week even. I'll take anything. It's just hard to know where to pull the trigger here pre-election because it's sitting at the top of the range, which could be resistance. This could get rejected. There could be a ton of volatility going into the event. There's been a lot of volatility on bonds, on the dollar, on yields, risk-off stuff going on. There's a lot of volatility on betting markets in the election. All this is getting sort of baked into where people think price is going to go. So it's, I don't know. I don't remember 2020 like this. If we dial back the clock, for some reason, I think because of COVID, like I don't remember anything about that period of time other than COVID. But even back then, pre-election, we weren't doing anything. You know, we went straight sideways for the entire year leading up to the election. We looked probably about as good as we do now going into the election. You might argue that we looked a little better. So what's today, the 24th? That's the 24th. At least at that time, we were breaking horizontals. You know, we can think about what people were talking about back then. We were above the 10K horizontal. We were above the 12K horizontal. We had just freshly broken out at this time at the end of October. We were starting to get above the 2019 high from the plus token Ponzi stuff. So in some ways we looked about where we do now. In some ways we looked slightly better. It's tough to really like nail it down. It's not like we looked wildly better going into that election than we do now. But I think it was more convincing from a technical perspective that there was obvious horizontals. We weren't in some diagonal, at least not that I was measuring it as a diagonal. The predominant feeling at the time was this was some sort of inverted head and shoulders. We were back to the neckline. We had survived a potential cloud breakdown. Does this sound familiar? We made a bullish TK recross on the daily, price above cloud. So we're about as far along on that story as we were in 2020. Um, 2016, I don't know if does Kraken have 2016? Yeah, I guess they do. 2016. Am I thinking is that the right date? November 2020? Or am I just blanking? That's right? Yeah. Anyway, I think that's right. I'm terrible with dates. Terrible with the calendar. Terrible with time. 2016 was what? Was it this? That's very difficult to see. And again, we looked about where we do now in that we had just survived Bitfinex blowing up with the hacked coins slowly curling up. And then post-election, post 2016, right, we took off. So this, what I was thinking the other day was like, this kind of feels like it did in 4 years ago, 2020, because we were really just chopping around for a long time. Now, we hadn't made a new all-time high up until that point. But if we look at now, it's really the same story. It's not like an impressive real deal trend insofar as we've kind of made a higher high, we've kind of not made higher highs. There's clearly horizontal resistance. In like the grand scope of things, has much changed? Price-wise, not really, other than we've made higher lows. So it's hard to say, like, it didn't feel like anything in 2020, and I remember tweeting out, like, oh, we have a bullish TK cross price above cloud, like this is it. Like, I didn't know we would blast off, but again, the cloud's trying to like keep you on the correct side of things and trying to say like this might not look like anything now, but it's bullish. Now, it said the same thing, to be fair, here, and we didn't go anywhere. This isn't a promise that things happen. It's just this is what things look like if things happen. It's just a giant decision tree. But if we were below the cloud, if we were down here, that's the time to be turbo bearish, but we're not. We're just not. So it's like, yeah, it's not exciting. It's okay. It's fine. But if it's correct, the cloud at this point will be saying, yes, this is totally fine for bullish continuation into the election. Regardless of the outcome, we could see something like this where things get angry down to 61, and then post-election Bitcoin does post-election Bitcoin things and just continues. I don't know. There's all sorts of measurements for higher, for 80s, for 90s. We can turn on the yearly pivots. If they're on here, they should be pivot points. I will be heavily relying on yearly pivots as far as as far as support resist levels. These print the first of each year. They're based on the highs and lows of the previous year. So we will get a new set of pivots next year, January 1st. The more volatile the previous year, the wider the pivots are. The lower the volatility of the previous year or the previous period in the measurement, the tighter the pivots will be. Post having bullish rallies typically reach the R5 yearly pivot at the very least. And you can backtest this. So it's currently at 116. That doesn't happen instantly. That's throughout the rally. But sure, like that's a target. The immediate resistance is 80, 81-ish, depending on the exchange. And I think that's a fair, even without using fibs, that's a fair first mover spot. If we want to just look at, I don't know, there's a million ways you can measure this. If you go this high to this low, roughly it's about at 80, 81. I don't know what the market's going to pay attention to fib wise, other than let's just use the pivot. I don't know. It's hard to say. That's why it's just important to see what happens as it breaks out. But can I look at ASPI? Sure. I thought that was a meme coin for a second. You can totally see that happening if we get rejected at 69K. If we get rejected. I mean, we can get rejected for the next 2-3 months repeatedly, but so long as we stay above the cloud, I have no issues with it. It's just trading around that is very difficult. Just as this range has been difficult. You know, could you imagine what if we do this thought experiment? I thought about this the other day. I gotta find it. Where is it on here? Bars pattern. If we take this, so let's say this is like the maximum, right? Can I flip this? Flipped. Okay. So that's the maximum. And let's say this does nothing into January, right? And we get this like huge cup thing into January. But that's possible. That would make everybody angry. But as long as we stay above the trend metrics, we're fine. As long as the trend metrics are flipping bullish, we're fine. It's just hard to pinpoint down the speed and intensity of anything pre-election. If we turn off the cloud for a second, the 20-week and the 50-day are flipping bullish. The 50-day and the 200-day are set to flip bullish here within the next 2 weeks. And price is still above the 20-week moving average. So it's not exciting, but it's not bearish. It just isn't. All that gets much more bullish, or sorry, much more bearish sub 62, sub 60, and you know the cloud isn't lying to you. Sub 60, and that's when I'm bearish. If we're at the bottom of this range, yeah, you know, I'm going to be bearish down here every time. I'm going to be bullish up here every time. But right now we lean bullish for sure. Ken on Twitter, on X. When do you think people are going to stop calling it Twitter? I don't think I'm ever going to stop calling it Twitter. X is just such a weird thing to say. Ken on Twitter says, what about a double top possibility? I don't know what time frame, unless you're talking like, are you talking like this possibility? We turn off pivots for a sec. I guess the thing about the double top stuff is like we'd have to come all the way back down to 17, and then it would be a double top, you know, just like in if this is the double top you're talking about, just like in April 2022, it wasn't really fair to call this a double top. Like it wasn't a confirmed and completed double top until you're back at the support or resist level. Then it was absolutely a double top. Here, this doesn't really look like a double top to me. I don't know how you would. Just trying to think how would you even draw that? I don't know. But one thing I was saying is into the election, we could get this, which is a huge bearish preamble that we wouldn't want to see. It's Twitter. I agree. It's never not going to be Twitter to me. I think Elon is nuts. But that's in the near term. We don't want to see this going into the end of the year. If we see this going to the end of the year, it's going to be a lot less bullish, obviously. But that's something to watch out for. We're kind of still working on this possibility. It's just tough because it's so range bound, and the range is so massive, and it still hasn't reached a definitive conclusion. It's looking and leaning bullish, but the problem is every time it's at the top of the range, it looks like it's going to break down. It doesn't have the momentum to break up. And then when it does break down, it doesn't quite go anywhere. And like today, like we're up from 65 yesterday. We're back at 67.8. So it doesn't even know what it wants to be when it grows up, you know. Do I think there's going to be more volatility post-election or pre? I think post, because, sorry, pre-election, you just generally have a risk-off stance from people because it's this massive uncertainty. More so than previous elections in crypto because it's perceived or real that the Harris White House would be detrimental to crypto. whereas a Trump White House would be beneficial to crypto. And there's clearly people trading off of that idea. So once that is finalized post-election, then I think that gives way to people making a decision, making up their mind one way or the other. The other thing to think about is if we don't have an answer on the election until like Saturday, those 3 days after the election could be extremely volatile with all sorts of stuff. You know, who knows, right? So there's that to think about and worry about. The problem is it's still a very close election. Regardless of betting market and polls, it could go either way, and people are just saying, okay, I'm going to wait, you know, I'm just going to wait, see what happens until there's some finalization there. Chop is definitely not fun, but at least it's as nasty as it's been. We're still basically where we were in March, you know, like we're flat since March. Just reading chat. Sol looks amazing. Yeah, we'll take a look at Sol. Sol's definitely one of the stronger, if not the strongest charts out there, other than MSTR, which is super, super strong. Dell says he doesn't think the election will be volatile. It'll be called by midnight. I mean, look, I hope that there is, whatever happens, there's a clear winner. There's no ambiguity, and that's it. We move on. I hope that's the case. And the fear is that that won't be the case. I mean, the ultimate uncertainty would be electoral college is tied or sub 270 for both sides, and then it goes to like, what is it, the House or the Senate? And that would just be not great for anybody. As far as the certainty metric, you know, we want the certainty. What's up, Peter? November 3rd, 2020 was election day. Was it? Are you sure? I thought it was always November 5th. I mean, I believe you, but. So that's BTC, you know, there's not really much to do here. There was this like low time frame head and shoulders thing. It you know, it broke down, it didn't go anywhere. Some people traded it. It reached the target, we bounced. Does anything look great here? Cloud-wise, not yet. Cloud has a very hard time with non-trending slop and chop like this. So like it picked up going into October, it picked up on the low time frames very clearly that was a key support. This was whatever megaphone thing it was. When this broke down, it said we're certainly less bullish. We're more neutral than anything, but less bullish than we were in that period. And then it picked this back up well in that, again, who knows what it's trying to say, but it's telling you, yeah, price is back above the cloud. Cool. We're bullish. So in that regard, on low time frames, we're still bullish, but is this like tradable? I don't know. I don't know what this is anymore on low time frames. And on high time frames, the story hasn't changed for weeks at this point. The story is still, hey, you've got this range that is trying to end. It doesn't look bearish to me. I don't know what bearish pattern this would be. Now, let's say it was like a rising wedge, then we could say, yeah, that's bearish. Or if it was a rising channel, that would make me more worried. But that's not what we've seen. We've seen plenty of opportunities for the sellers to try to take over and accelerate this to the downside, and it just hasn't happened. So, yeah, this still leans bullish on high time frames. Still looks good. From there, we talked about fibs. We talked about yearly pivots. There's of course this massive cup and handle that is being picked up by the legacy bros. I'm seeing a lot of the legacy accounts who don't trade BTC talk about this cup and handle possibility, and I think that's always important to see, like, what are people who aren't like part of the cult, what are they seeing on this chart? They are also seeing cup and handle type stuff. So, you know, that could all fail. All this could go to zero, whatever, but it's not how it's leaning right now. What's up, Joey? That's not how it's leaning. So the time to be bearish is when it looks like it's leaning bearish, but it doesn't look like that to me. The other thing, we can add Bollinger Bands to this story on the weekly. And what do the Bollinger Bands tell you? Well, what do we know about Bollinger Bands? They expand in volatility, they contract in consolidation. So we've contracted pre-expansion, pre-volatility expansion, pre-range expansion, depending on where we sit on the midpoint of the Bollinger Bands, tends to tip the bias, tells you where the market leans, bullish or bearish. So that's just the basics of Bollinger Bands. And then we can backtest this and say, okay, Bollinger Bands on the weekly were this tight at this time. What happened? What did it look like? So you can go through that, and we are above the midpoint. This leans bullish. Below 62, that's different. This hasn't broken out yet from the Bollinger Bands. I always like to change the colors to make it like so obvious where this stuff is. Originally, I would do that for people on mobile because I would get these comments like, hey, I'm watching on mobile and I can't see the charts or whatever. Anyway, Bollinger Bands. So we're at the top, towards the top of the band. We haven't broken out of this yet. That's another point to watch. If we start to break the resistance band, then that is a very good sign for bullish continuation, especially after a period of consolidation like this. And again, you can backtest this. You can look at last time this year, what happened. We broke out, we started to walk the bands. Nothing is a guarantee, nothing is a promise, but that's what it looks like. This is the bearish version of that, where we get held below the midpoint and we walk the bands lower. Here's another bullish version. We hold above the midpoint, walk the bands higher. This is absolutely something we were watching in 2020. Same thing in 2019. 2019, people were calling for sub 2K. We were talking with Ledger. I remember this distinctly. We were talking about the breakout to 6. There was a cloud edge to edge. There was the Bollinger Bands. So the story is always the same for the most part. You're always looking for the same stuff. So we would love to see, in this case, a break above the Bollinger Bands and consistent, right? Consistent just walking the bands. That's what John Bollinger calls it. But that's bullishness, and we are on the very early stages of what could be bullish breakout, bullish continuation. I am in the Cyber Hornet cult. I think we all are. Most of us, anyway, at this point, have been around for this long. Do love the Kool-Aid. Some people, a lot of people always tell me, like, okay, what does the backtest look like? And my reply is always, why don't you tell me? Like, I've lived this, okay? I know what the backtest is because I've lived through it. I've traded it, you know? I don't talk about stuff that doesn't work at this point. You only see me talking about like 3 or 4 things most of the time. Bollinger Bands, cloud, fractals, basic moving averages, yearly pivots. You know, it's not like I have some complex trading system over here. But anyway, that's BTC. And if you're an altcoiner, I said this yesterday, you want BTC to be bullish because inevitably that rolls to alts, regardless of dominance and total 2 and all that other stuff. You don't want BTC breaking down. BTC is the leader. It is what sets the tone for the entire market. So you should have an opinion at least on BTC and where that's going, whether or not you trade it or not, and allocate appropriately. You know, if you think BTC is bearish, what are you doing sitting in page 56 of CoinMarketCap, right? Like, that doesn't quite make sense to me, because if BTC breaks down, your favorite altcoin isn't going to survive, you know? Yeah, Joey, but that's probably why I'm so visual. I give people trouble for yelling at me about backtesting, but that's one of the reasons the cloud is so valuable, because you could just pop it on there and see, okay, what did it look like? What did it look like on the weekly in 2020? Well, in October 2020, we broke out of the cloud on the weekly again. That was the beginning. Where are we here? We're still above the weekly cloud. That hasn't changed. It hasn't changed since January, right? The other bear trade that we could watch for would be a bearish edge to edge from 55 to 45, but that doesn't trigger until we're at 55. But other than that, I don't know what there is to be bearish about this on the weekly cloud, because everything still says all systems go. If you pop on the lagging span, one thing I never talk about is lagging span, but what you'll notice is when momentum is flat and the trend loses steam, you will see the lagging span move into price. And it's certainly an early warning sign that things could go south on you, just like they did in 2021. You know, we never really went anywhere, right? So that's if you like the lagging span. That's another part of the checklist. If the lagging span is above price, which is just basically telling you, are we making new highs or not, then that adds to the cloud's certainty that this is actually bullish, right? But the longer we chop around, if we chopped around for another 3 months, lagging span goes nowhere. It just stays where it is. But you know, this doesn't look bearish. It didn't look bearish here in 2020. In 2016, we don't have quite the data on Kraken, but we'll go to the index on TradingView. This was 2016. Here you get a weekly breakout, and the rest is history. So we're seeing what we need to see. We're at where we need to be. It just doesn't feel like anything because we haven't gone anywhere since March. But on no time frame, 3-day, 2-day, whichever time frame you're looking at on the high time frames, none of this is telling me, hey, watch out, this could be bearish. It's all either leaning bullish or leaning very bullish still. Tell them about the 150 to 500 chop. Yeah, again, it would be a different story if this is what we looked like on the daily or the weekly. Different story, completely. Because the cloud is telling you here we're bearish. This is still bearish. I mean, this is the ETH-BTC story. The ETH-BTC story is you're bearish until you're breaking above the TK lines and into the cloud. And that wasn't until November 2015. And that's not how we look now. So between everything, it's hard to be bearish until we're given evidence otherwise, because we are where the cloud expects us to be if we're bullish. I don't know. If you don't know the historical performance, you don't know your edge. Yeah, I guess. I mean, I'm not going to disagree. Like, the reason I use what I use is because so much other stuff has gotten filtered out through the wayside. But it's different if you're new coming to this and you don't know the importance of whatever, you know? Like, if you're just looking at this with a blank stare and you have no idea, and you don't know chart patterns or candlesticks or whatever else, then yeah, technicals are kind of useless to you. But understanding that this is obviously not as bullish as it could look, but it's still fine. I don't know. It looks fine to me. Jeff on Twitter, where do we factor in politics and war? I mean, the geopolitical stuff has been all over the place historically. Since 2022, has it mattered for Bitcoin at all? Arguably no. There are a lot of people that like the macro doomer people love to overemphasize the geopolitical stuff. It kind of doesn't matter until it does, which is like a total cop out and a hedge, but it's true. Like, where on this chart has anything geopolitically mattered in the grand scheme of things? Now, it'll matter like on the hour, on the day it happens, maybe. You don't want to be 100x long if missiles are going off in the Middle East or something, but in general, you'd have no idea. You would not be able to point on this chart where that happened, right? Like, the biggest thing that happened on this chart recently was the UJ carry trade stuff. But even that, you couldn't really point it out. You know, you'd be wondering, like, what's this on the weekly, right? Why did we drop here? But it's just been chop. Now, you could probably guess where the ETFs were announced, where they were approved, right? You can see that on the chart. But the negative events, at least in the past year and a half, you can't really see that on the chart, I don't think. For me, when the missiles fly, it's time to buy. I guess, I don't know. So that's BTC. I don't know. It's just been the same, right? Nothing's really happening, but we're getting closer to some volatility event, and it looks like it's leaning bullish. I don't know if there's anything else I want to even talk about. It's really nothing to say. I guess we can look at the daily fractals. What the daily fractals are good at, especially with the cloud in conjunction of the cloud, is giving you obvious levels where it's a good time to add based on the indicator. The indicator is always going to tell you to add at new highs. It's going to tell you to subtract or add to shorts at lower lows. The current daily Williams fractal is at 69.4, is that 5, which is just a new high, you know. Now, if we were to go down a time frame or give it a couple days, the trailing stop loss fractal would be at 65.1. So there's some wiggle room here between a trailing stop loss at 65.1, bids down here at 60 to 61, and then adds at 69.4. That's it. You know, there's nothing really else to say beyond that. Black swan events. I mean, you can go to COVID, you can go to Bitfinex blowing up, you can look at all the events and what's happened. The answer is bearish, down. In general, we are not going to say that we're long, not long volatility, but we're inverse to the VIX, we're inverse to the dollar in general. These things aren't permanent correlations, but if the NASDAQ sells off, one of the reasons we even talk about legacy at all is because, yeah, we're in the same universe. We're not just on our own. The S&P, like, it looks okay. What else can you say about it? It looks fine. It's done well. The bears are going to say this is overbought. I'm going to say in the cloud there's a TKC clamp here, which just means it went up really fast and went sideways, has no momentum. The mean reversion target is 5,500. Does it look like a great trade up here? No, it doesn't. Based on the cloud, it doesn't look like a great trade. If we dial this back to like, what is it, this day? As ugly as this looked, this is the day where the cloud was like, yes, great trade. Where that's a bullish Kumo breakout plus a bullish TK cross plus a bullish cloud. Cloud stayed bullish the whole time. So, you know, I mean, that's from there to here is the trade so far. And then from there you can add trailing stop loss fractals if you want as well. Exit, yes. And we haven't triggered a trailing stop loss yet on the S&P. What a lot of people pointed out the other day was the potential of this like rising wedge thing. Let me see if do I have it here? Yeah. So this scares me a little bit for crypto, for Bitcoin. I guess there's a subtle bear divergence here on the daily. But you'd think if this was bearish, it would break a little harder. The other thing, using the correct cloud, the TK lines are getting ready to cross over the next couple days, probably within the election time. So if you get a TK cross all the way up here, that's telling you to jump out. I mean, that's going to take a minute. But yeah, I can't imagine crypto's too happy with that. Yeah, the S&P and NASDAQ, it goes through periods of coupling and recoupling and decoupling with Bitcoin for sure. But the issue is if things get really bearish, then everything just correlates to one. You know, dial it back to August, right? What happened in August? Everything went down together. All risk went down. So I guess the question is where could this break down, and do you think everything would correlate at that point? I would think if this starts to break down, everything would start to correlate again. So it's just something to watch for. But the S&P hasn't been bearish since last time this year. And it looks fine, you know, like you've had people screaming every single tick higher, every single new all-time high, like this is the one, it's over, it's going to roll over. So it's a boy who cried wolf syndrome. Yeah, eventually it'll roll over, but is that going to happen in the next week, in the next year? I have no idea. It still looks fine. It still looks fine. Totally fine. But yes, the cloud or the measured move or the fibs, the 50% retrace of this is 55-ish, 56, something like that. 50, we'll call it 55. That would be the break of this. But does it make sense to short all-time highs? I don't think so. But that's a setup you could take, because you can always say the stop loss is a new all-time high. And that's the trade, you know? That's fine. It could be a hedge, it could be whatever. But I wouldn't be simultaneously 100x long BTC with this potential breakdown and trading this as well. Like that doesn't make sense to me, you know? Like if you're actually bearish on the S&P or you're bullish on the dollar, maybe don't go max risk, max long on crypto right now. It is very odd that despite the dollar strength, BTC hasn't seemed to care at all. At all. So that is very interesting. Why that's happening, I'm not sure. I haven't really heard any good evidence for that, but very interesting that the dollar has bounced 5%, 4.5%, and BTC is still in the range. Now that'll act as a headwind for BTC, but you'd think it'd be more bearish than it is. Yeah, Jeff on Twitter, he's talking about the correlations between the S&P and the Qs. That's the thing, like they can recouple, decouple. Are we trading with Nvidia? What are we trading with right now? You know, are we trading with the Qs? It feels like we're trading with the Qs to me, because the Qs have done nothing really since June. Is this chart bearish? I don't think so. Trend looks fine. Is it excited to be here? No. Is there necessarily a direct trade to take? I don't think so. You know, that feels like BTC. Like it's also towards the top of the range. It's also towards all-time high. So it certainly feels like we're trading more with Dixie, or sorry, the Qs than NASDAQ. And then there's gold, which just looks insanely strong. And you're getting, not only are you getting this strength, but you're getting Tenkin bounces on the daily from gold. It's holding this blue line. Very strong when you see that for any trend, but to see that out of gold, not exactly common for gold to do so well on the daily like that. Yeah, we for sure have higher lows. We for sure are closer to higher highs. I don't know if there's like some magical technical that I'm not looking at that makes this out better. You can back this up and say, okay, this thing had a cup and handle. Where does that go? That roughly measures to where we are. The higher the time for, the more you zoom out on this, the scarier it kind of looks. Like if we go to the weekly, it's like, what are we doing here? You know, go to the monthly. Look at this thing. It just literally doesn't go down. It only goes up. Crazy. But it looks fine. Looks totally fine. Can the fractals be an issue if there's a large candle and thus making the sell trigger? Totally, Joey. But ideally you get further consolidation. Um, even on the S&P, if we look in August on the daily, I guess that doesn't really count, but um, even if you get a deep drop, if you're real deal bullish, you will get new fractals further along up here. So I don't know. S&P looks fine. Bitcoin looks fine. It's kind of unexciting so far. Where do we want to go? We want to go alts. We can go alts. Sol, for sure, has been the strongest. Sol BTC chart has looked better. Sol ETH is at all-time highs. The daily on this looks fine. You know, it again, it doesn't look super exciting because it's been in this range for so long, but it's in the part of the cloud where everything is turning green trend-wise, and the next resistance is just the horizontal. But it had the inverted head and shoulders, and it's breaking up. I don't know. I mean, like, not much has happened, right? Not much has happened. Moving averages are bullish. Cloud is bullish. I think being able to consolidate just like BTC for this long, doing nothing and just eating time, you know, again, anybody who's wanted to sell has had plenty of time to sell. I think that's more bullish than bearish, personally. It's not like we had some crazy wick spike and then we just bleed, bleed, bleed. We're just sitting here on a lot of stuff. ETH is kind of a different story, right? Because it is bleeding, but Sol looks fine, you know, like, sure. Where could this go? Again, we could play the fib game as we kind of have. This was the old head and shoulders breakdown idea, but you can measure this, that measures to 190. You can measure it as the range that measures to like 250. And then we can go up time frames and get some crazier targets, but that doesn't really make too much sense in the near term to me. So I just like watching the daily, watching this play out until it's out of the range. The only thing that matters is the range, you know. So that's kind of it for now on Sol. Sol next fees 200. Oh, the level? Yeah, the horizontals are the way to go for sure. 185 big level, 200 big level. I would love to see this consolidate from 185 to 200, but it looks fine here. It looks totally fine. And you contrast this with ETH, and it's a completely different story. ETH is struggling below the cloud, you know, like it just says not now. Now's not the time. This may end up fine. The low may be in for ETH. I don't know. I'm not saying this has to continue breaking down, but it's a different story when you look at Sol and BTC. The ETH equivalent for the bullishness of Sol and BTC would be like 3,500, 3,600. It's just struggling down here. Different people are going to have different feelings on where this is in the cycle, what they want to do with whatever. It's just trend-wise, it looks like this is a laggard compared to BTC and ETH for sure. And yeah, this could morph into an ascending triangle, into a head and shoulders. It could break up to 34 or whatever, right? But this is about opportunity costs. If you're just honest about trading this, where could this go? When is the question? You know, like, what do you think is going to break up first? Sol, BTC, or ETH, or something else? And then you just trade that accordingly, based on confidence. But Sol looks much better than this. It just is what it is, you know. You can pop on the moving averages. We're below the 200-day. It's a bearish cross. You know, there's all sorts of reasons why right now just doesn't make a lot of sense for ETH to me. I like strength. I like buying strength. I don't like sitting around and waiting for this to play out. But yeah, this could easily be fine. Other stuff looks way better. That's it. There's not much else to say really about ETH. Um, Doge looks great because it's consolidating post breakout. This is always what you want to see. If you're bullish, you never want to see like this over here in March, right? We had a crazy breakout, and then it just got slammed down. Empty book, thin book, whatever you want to call it. We're not seeing that here. We're seeing further consolidation. So that's a win in my book. This measures higher still. Looks like it's just pausing here. If we turn on yearly pivots, which I haven't looked at. So there's a yearly pivot just below us. There's a yearly pivot at 16, at 19. But it looks fine. It looks better than most charts, and certainly looks better than ETH. And if you start to like stack this up against each other trend-wise, even TIA is potentially going to turn out better than ETH in that it probably has a more explosive percentage move than ETH. This isn't some like advertisement to take this trade, but that's the move potentially is let's call it like 680 to 10, I don't know why people are fixated on this thing. I still haven't seen a single actual on-chain data evidence that anybody's using this thing other than for speculation, which is fine. But the people who are in it tell me, oh man, there's all these airdrops. It's the chain of chains or whatever. I personally haven't seen evidence of that, but it doesn't mean it's not happening. But yeah, this thing into like November, post-election, this thing is primed for a move to 10 plus. Absolutely. Sui has already done super well. The question on these alts, for me, if I'm trading them, it's like there are how many alts do you realistically, let's say 50 that you'd want to trade. The question is always, how long do I want to sit in this thing after it's done well? And eventually more and more people ask that question along with the unlocks. And I'm not saying this has to roll over, this has to be bearish. It's just you're eating time, right? Like Sol's starting to move. Sui hasn't moved since 2 weeks ago, right? So when you're playing this competitive real-time strength game, it gets harder for Sui and anything that's already done so well to just continue unless it has another catalyst or whatever, right? But it's already moved from the bottom. It's already moved 400% since August. And since September, it's still up 100%. So near term, what do you expect? Like you've already got your 400% move. Near term, it's tough. I don't know. But cycle wise, I don't know. Maybe this goes to 10. Who knows, right? But here right now, I don't see anything that screams bullish continuation. It just looks flat and sad, and it made its move, and that's trading alts, right? But people get very fixated on, this is the new chain, everybody's using this, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, things like Aptos and everything else is sort of moving around it. Say hasn't really done well, but Aptos looks fine. It hasn't moved up 400%, but it's done better than most everything else. People are fixated on was the highest gainers in 2023. Right, Turk. That's the thing that people, I don't know if it's the retail mentality. It's like they just want everything to go up forever to infinity and beyond with no consolidation, no pullbacks. I understand that. I get it. But the reality is, like, the people that are crying about TIA missed probably the original move, or they were super late, and they just think, yeah, there's going to be another what is this? That was a 700% move or whatever it was. Outside of Kraken, it was probably even more. Um, so that it's taken how many months since February? So there are tons of people sitting in this thing just eating the drawdown, right? There are tons of people who are adding on the way down thinking that it's going to bounce. I get it. I get it. Which is another reason why you take your trades, you move on. It's like a public restroom. You do your business and you move on. You don't get married to the chain. You don't get married to the idea that Tezos is going to be the one. Sorry. And we can go on and on and on. Historically, there are coins that over time just bleed against themselves, against Bitcoin, against strength. And so yeah, strong opinions held loosely. You can like Tezos, you can like Chainlink, whatever, but it doesn't mean you can like Curve. Curve is another great example. I love the Curve example just because it's such a great DeFi product. It is an integral part of the DeFi ecosystem. And meanwhile, the token looks like this. That's where people get like they lose their mind because like, what do you mean this thing isn't doing well or isn't worth anything? Like it has to do well. I use it every day or I use it all the time or everybody uses this thing. What do you mean? I'm not disagreeing with you there. It's just this is the reality, right? The reality is something is wrong with the tokenomics. Unlocks, issuance, supply, rewards, I don't know. Something's wrong that the chart looks like this. Which is why I just trade on technicals, right? We can talk about on-chain analytics till you're blue in the face, but the reality is technicals matter way more most of the time. Ever been in a situation where there's a market crash and no liquidity? I haven't been in that situation. I don't trade stuff super far down the market cap table, so I don't really have that problem, but I can imagine if you're trading, just on Kraken, if we look at like the bottom, if you're trading some of this stuff with no daily volume, and you're like, you're in this multi-week DCA position, you're stuck, right? Which is another reason to not pay too much attention to some of that stuff, or to have an exit plan way ahead of time. But you shouldn't have that issue with anything in the top 10, anything in like the top 20. Realistically, you shouldn't really have that issue. Yeah, big unlocks for Tia. Turk, I'm very curious how Tia is going to look after those unlocks. But yeah, all of DeFi is it looks like this, You'd think that it would look better than it does, but it just doesn't, like, let's be honest here. Even Link is probably one of the most important, if not the most important oracles everywhere. And you're not really seeing that on the chart, If we were to measure the metric of like how many DeFi transactions are backed by Link or like TVL backed by Link, it's probably like at an all-time high. It continues to push all-time highs, but you're not going to see that on the chart, so it doesn't always carry over to value accrual for the coin. Some of the other big stuff, I think the best looking meme chart outside of Doge would be SHIB. SHIB I like because it's gone sideways for 6 months. Now there's no promises or guarantees, certainly not financial advice, but when a move happens, it's usually on the back of a multi-month consolidation, multiple months of nothing. Look at the move in February, right? So I could see another like late Q1 rotation move on this. Anything above the horizontal, whatever this is, 2000 sats, would get me very interested. But it looks like it wants to try to do something. Definitely. The issue with all of the stuff on like Dex Screener or Solana is most of that stuff, the analysis is going to be stale by the time people watch this. So it's like it doesn't. What do I care? You know, like even this coin up here, PopCap. Um, what can I say about this thing other than it's making highs? I don't know. By the time somebody watches this, this thing could be down 50%. I don't know. So it's like a lot of this newer stuff is kind of just a lottery ticket. That's why I prefer to have multiple months, multiple years of stuff to look at. Tao's another one that kind of just, I can see people getting stuck in this stuff because it did so well when nothing else was doing well. And now it is just flat, you know. Cycle wise, this could go to 2,000. I don't know, right? But here, this doesn't look like a trade to me. If you're playing the rotation game, you're just looking for strength, and this is not super strong up here. What else? What else? What else? JEP was another one. Anything in the Solana ecosystem looks great, or probably looks great because Solana looks great. And the same thing's going to be true with ETH. If ETH starts to break out, the layer 2s on ETH should look good. The restaking stuff should look good. Do they have Lido on Kraken? Something like Lido is going to look better. Lido basically has that same inverted head and shoulders fractal. And it hasn't been bullish since March. So yeah, it could break out. It could look great. And it's likely going to look better when ETH looks better. But it makes more sense now that the Solana ecosystem stuff looks better because that's where the action is right now. Jito, this looks kind of sad sideways, but I think Ray was one I pulled up the other day. Where is it? It was down here. Like, yeah, party on, right? It bottomed, double bottom, triple bottom. It's had a couple. It's had a couple of like miniature consolidations in here. If I can highlight this, and then this whole thing, right? Sure. Yeah, love it. That's where people are, you know. Me, Duck, and Cred. I'm happy to talk with anybody at any time if they want to get together and do a vid. For sure. So that's alts. You know, is there anything else that I like that looks good? You're not going to hear me talking about Mew before the move because that's just not stuff I watch or care about. And I know that's a very particular audience, but it's just I don't really care. I just don't. So yeah, I like strength. Soul strong. BTC is ready to break out. As far as legacy, we have the correct cloud. We talked about S&P and NASDAQ. Those look okay. I guess we'll switch to MSTR because there's a lot of people very keyed into MSTR. Where's it on my list here? There it is. I believe this could be a new all-time high if we dial this thing all the way back. Okay, not yet. It's a Bitcoin era all-time high for MSTR. There's a ton of conversations on what's going to matter here. Is the premium to NAV going to matter? Are the technicals going to matter? Is reality even going to matter? Is this thing just going to be a short squeeze to infinity? I don't know. All I know is the technicals still look great on this thing. I would be careful if we get up to the 6,500 level. I would be careful. But based on the trend, yeah, it looks fine. It's had a ridiculous 45-degree angle bull trend that it's held for a couple of years now. And it's back at the midline, which tells you there's a ton of room for upside if this thing does get turbo bullish. So it looks great. Looks great. We can turn on yearly pivots. We can look at fibs. All that stuff measures higher. Interesting. So the the R5 yearly pivot for this year for MSTR was 207, 208. So we are beyond that already for MSTR. Next year's yearly pivots are going to just blow out completely, and then we'll get a better idea of resistance. When this happens, which is pretty rare, but when it happens on the yearly, you can just go to like the quarterly, bi-yearly. I guess they have all sorts of time frames now, but quarterly probably makes sense. Quarterly also gives you a target of like high 300s, but it looks fine. Sure, right? Bitcoin, if Bitcoin does well, MSTR does well. Is MSTR going to lead BTC? It could. Is MSTR going to outperform Solana? It definitely could and can and has been. If we turn on Solana, if we go to percent, turn off the cloud, depending on the time frame. So year to date, MSTR is absolutely walloped Solana. On a 1 year time frame, they're about even, and on a 6 month time frame, there's no contest. MSTR and the candles there. But yeah, it looks fine. Exactly, Dr. Manhattan. How bullish are we allowed to be? The issue here, I think, is if Bitcoin doesn't break up, then what do you do with MSTR? I don't know. It's like a risk reward sizing allocation question. Do you want to be 200% allocated into MSTR here? Some people already are and have been, and they've done great. Perfect, cool, awesome, good for them. It's not necessarily for me right now. I have some MSTR. I own MSTR. I'm just not. I'm not 200% allocated to MSTR. But it looks fine. My fear is that they're outside of the cadre of people talking about it in a smarter way. My fear is that there's a lot of retail who are just going to get crushed on this trade because one day eventually things aren't going to go their way. Right, you know, it's everything everybody's talking about. It's going to get into the index. It's going to do this. It's going to do that. Blah blah blah. Yeah, like it has crazy upside potential. Fundamentally, absolutely. FASB, you know, you can go down the list. But I would play it smartly, and I wouldn't say like, you know, I'm loading up on MSTX calls because it's only going to go straight up. Are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? So be careful. I'd be careful about that. And I'd be careful about, as people are talking about, you know, there's so many people on their subreddit or blah, blah, blah. Not financial advice, but be careful. Miners, what else do we want to talk about here? SMLR is a poor man's MSTR, sideways, doing nothing really actionable there. Coin is probably an election trade. I don't think that's a like big brain take or anything, but you think at this point there are enough people in crypto where there are enough people on the left in crypto with enough money to lobby for positive change on the regulatory front, regardless of who is in office. And I think we're seeing that. But I think what the market is going to do is going to get angry if Trump doesn't get elected on the crypto side of things. Whether or not that'll matter in the long term, I don't know. But so, you know, like, look, if you're all in on the Trump trade, coin is probably great for you. I imagine that does very well on any orange man being elected headlines. Square, sideways, nothing. Crypto adjacent, obviously, Cash App. But a lot of stuff is like just to the point where it's been in enough pain for a long enough period of time where it looks like it could be ready, certainly within the quarter, certainly, but not quite here. The miners are doing fine-ish. They're doing okay. On-chain revenue did pick up a little bit recently, despite hash rate going to all-time highs. On-chain transactions and fees, I was checking the other day, have picked up a bit, so the miners will benefit from that. Technicals on a WGMI look fine. We're not fully bullish on the cloud yet. This thing has been very, very range bound. But a lot of the miners have this, like IREN has this inverted head and shoulders thing that's working on. CleanSpark looks like coin to me, basically the same chart. Cores looks like nothing else. You gotta be careful of the rising wedge there, but it's essentially just sitting under all-time highs. Wolf has been strong lately. Looks fine. You know, I don't. Depends on your viewpoint. If you're here for the short-term stuff, I think you gotta be patient with the miners. But if Bitcoin does well, they should do well. Mara, sideways flat, trying to bottom. Riot, done surprisingly well. Doesn't, you know, nothing's like screaming off the page at me that like, yeah, these look like great trades here, other than maybe IREN, just because it's pre-breakout. But yeah, all this stuff looks okay. Much like BTC, it's been ranging longer than BTC has. BTC's been ranging for 6 months, so yeah, like again, it's a sizing risk conversation. If you think BTC is going to do well regardless, miners should do well eventually, ideally. And a lot of them have been flat for like years, right? It's just the way these companies are run isn't exactly the most efficient thing from a shareholder perspective. So you've got to deal with administrative costs and share dilution and all that fun stuff. But yeah, collectively, they've looked worse. You know, we'll put it like that. They've looked worse collectively. But they look okay. They look okay. Are they going to outperform MSTR and BTC? Some of them probably will for a short period of time. It's just hard to say like which ones are going to do the best. That's all. So if you like miners, yeah, they look okay. But it reminds me of the MSTR folks. Like they're just like there's these like pocket cults of people. We're just all in on like Riot, and I just don't get it. I just don't get it. You know, like it's okay to be allocating with a broad brush a little bit outside of just one miner or MSTR. You know, you can you can look around. That's all your eggs in one basket. I have nothing to say about Goat Coin. I have nothing to say. I have nothing, absolutely nothing to say about it. It's an interesting experiment. Anything else crypto-wise? I guess we can look at Bitcoin futures. Also looks bullish to me. It's a good little checkbox. Sometimes these look different than spot. This looks good. Yeah, Berg, I don't think Liz is losing that seat, unfortunately. But yeah, it's a contest to watch, I guess. I think he's down in the polls, Deaton versus Warren. I don't think he's anywhere close to even 50-50 in the polls there. But CME futures look good. Everything's just kind of like pre-breakout, looks okay. Waiting on the election. You know, I wish there was more to talk about here. But let's talk about Mag 7. Why not? NVIDIA's looked great. Claude likes it. Claude has liked it. Looks fine. You know, again, none of this stuff is like super, super exciting. But it's at an all-time high. Looks fine. Apple is probably the most pre-breakout chart that I can think of, other than like Roblox. There was some negative data about phone sales yesterday, but the technicals look phenomenal for this thing. Absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. So much so I'm slurring my words. No, but it looks great. It looks way better than Microsoft, which is just huge chop. Meta post breakout giving some back. Basically just chop. Netflix, it's just permanent up only. I have nothing really to say there. Amazon, similar to Microsoft, doing a bunch of nothing. Google's interesting, trying to build an inverted head and shoulders here. Looks, neutral to bearish. It's trying to do something. We'll see. Tesla up 21% today. I don't understand Tesla anymore at this point. Not saying that I ever did, but just like there's an MSTR cult, there's a Tesla cult. Sure, I've got nothing to say. There's no technical evidence why this thing moved up 20% today. Obviously, earnings were yesterday. I have nothing to say about that whatsoever. Lucid has pretty much been down only with the rising Trump odds. That's an EV company. I think they also had some like sales issues or something. So this thing looks like a do not touch. Uber continues to give some back post breakout, but still in bull territory. No issues there. IGV still firmly in bull territory. This is the software ETF, and we're just rattling down the list. But this is the speed of legacy. It goes slow. It looks fine. It's looked fine for a while now. And that's it. It's like, okay, next chart. Not much else to say. This is why people gravitate towards meme coins and MSTR and leverage. Because the reality is, most of the time, most things don't move quickly. And that's why when things move quickly, the growth versus value people rear their ugly head and they're like, okay, this thing's a bubble, it can't keep growing, blah, blah, blah. But the truth is, like, yeah, some stuff moves fast, some stuff moves slow. But IGV looks fine. Hack also looks fine. This is the cybersecurity ETF. Looks fine. Toast. Toast is the fintech app for restaurants. It reminds me of Hood a little bit because it's breaking out of its multi-year consolidation. Looks good. Looks fine. Where's Roblox? What's Roblox doing today? Looks fine. Again, it's like this stuff kind of moves pretty slow when you're comparing it to crypto. Yeah, Turk, anything? Somebody asked me about ASPI. ASPI isotopes. Is this like a uranium thing? Looks good. Had a bull trend, pulled back above the cloud. I like it. Ideally, whenever you can, you're always looking for something chart patterny. Obviously, this is hindsight, but you're always looking for this. There's no guarantee you get anything off of this, but when you see stuff like Carvana is a great example. What is it? CVNA. Look at that rising wedge. Just get slime. Where's slime? Look at that rising wedge. But when you see this stuff, you can't really ignore that, regardless of what it is. Because it had this. It even had this here, and we talked about this, I'm sure, on stream, on video. Like if you're a technical trader, this is the stuff you're looking for. You're looking for huge consolidations, multi-month, that are leaning one way, and then you take the appropriate trade. Carvana here, I would be very careful. That is an insane rising wedge. Insane. I bet you there's a bear div on this, but there's like a weak bear div because the RSI is just flat the whole time. It hasn't made lows really. But the fundamentals on this company, if you know anything about Carvana, not the greatest. But has that really mattered? No. It hasn't. Track. What is this? I mean, it's fine. It's had a decent move, 150% since April. I don't know. It looks okay. There's nothing like there's nothing obviously bearish like there was back here. It just is there a bear div? So there's a bear div on the momentum, higher high, lower low, and RSI. Food tracking, like supply chain. I assume that's what you mean. Yeah, supply chain. Yeah, it looks fine. I don't know. I don't really have anything specific to say about it, other than it's got a bear div on the daily, or on the weekly, sorry. But it looks okay. Music? Is this a crypto? If it just listed, I've got nothing to say about it. I mean, that's just permanently my policy. I've got there's nothing for me to analyze, you know? If this is the right coin on, is that Huobi, HTX? It doesn't look like anything. It tried to break out, failed. Neutral at best. Doesn't look like anything. What looks better, Doge or SHIB? Well, SHIB is pre-breakout. So depending on where you sit on the fence on that, if you're trading it as a breakout trade, then you're waiting probably. Doge is post-breakout. So I don't know, you know, that's a you conversation, but both of them to me look totally fine. Yeah, Ape was up 60% in a day, and that's going to take... This is a probability game, right? What are the odds? What are the odds that this moves up another 60% tomorrow? 0? I'll take 0 on that. How about the next week? Probably not 0, but probably not above 5%. What about over the next 6 months, month, year, right? So it just needs time. It you know, this is the move. Okay, next coin, right? Like that's the retail alt mentality. The issue is that people get trapped chasing this thing, and now it's like it's down. What is it down? Down 35% in 2 days. No, it doesn't look particularly like anything anybody should touch. I mean, right? Like this is still people taking profit, or people who are underwater from getting in late selling, and you've just got a ton of that going on. If we look at the BCH chart, it kind of reminds me of that. Just because BCH goes through these periods where was it on the daily? Yeah, back here, same thing. It'll go through these periods where it doesn't do anything for a very long time. Then it moves. That was a 200% move in like 2 weeks, was it? Yeah. So again, I've said this before, but it's like, what more do you want? You know, people just think things could go up forever, but that's not how this works. If you're sitting in this anything that looks like this for any period of time, especially for 2 years, and it gets close to your break even, what do you think people are going to do? They're going to sell. That's clearly what the chart has said. Lots of people came in here and just sold it off, right? So in the ape cinematic universe of the chart, you're still waiting on a bottoming process. Now that isn't to say ape can't have another 60%, right? That's not what we're saying. We're just saying these things typically don't happen back to back to back to back to back, right? So this took another like 6 months for BCH to break out again. And where are we here? It's always the same story. You get the breakout. It's hard to sustain rallies on most of these coins. They bleed and bleed and bleed, and then they establish a new floor or don't and go on from there, you know? Yeah, I wouldn't ever buy this, trade this, etc. It's just as an example of what to expect on stuff that moves 60% in a day. It's just a probability thing. Would I take profit on a move that I'm up 60% on in a day? Absolutely. As would most people, I'd imagine. XLU, so energy over, can we do QQQ? Energy over NASDAQ. Let me fix this. Yeah, it looks good. I know a lot of people are they long energy at this point? I don't know what people are on energy anymore. It looks like an ascending triangle to me. And it's certainly, if you back this up, it's certainly at a huge low. This is energy versus tech. There's even, you could probably argue, some sort of like descending broadening wedge thing. I'd show you the Bed Bath & Beyond version, but that chart is no longer in existence. They're out of business. So I would like alerts up here, because what I don't want to do, I'm not interested in range trading this from like here to here, just in general. But yeah, that's a trade you could take. You could range trade this from 0.16 to, I don't know, 0.22 or something. But I think the real trade is on the breakout. Where does this go? But yeah, it's an interesting idea and concept that a lot of people, unless this is utilities. Am I confusing? Okay. Utilities versus NASDAQ. Utilities versus NASDAQ. And utilities have had a crazy year. Crazy year. Thanks, Fox. No, that's a Jack. That's a Jack special. This is why you're not going to see me sitting in a range-bound market without having a bias or an edge or anything, right? It's gone nowhere, despite a lot of this uranium stuff doing really, really well. It's just range-bound, you know? Like, what else is there to say? I like this better at 8 than at 6 or at 5 or at 4. I like it better at 8 because then it tells you there's some strength, you know? Otherwise, you're just sitting, waiting. This has been 4 years of sideways. Just like, you know, at what point is the opportunity cost exactly a Jack shell? At what point is the opportunity cost just too much to bear? And you're better off in anything else uranium related, you know? Is there a dividend on this? I guess there must be. I don't know what it is, but yeah, just lots and lots of chop. Lots and lots of chop. All right. I don't know how much more we got in us here. For the most part, everything is just waiting on the election. That's pretty much it. And then after that, it's FOMC. Before that, it's the unemployment rate. I don't think there's much else to discuss, honestly. The bullishness in the BTC is most welcomed, and the longer it can hold on to those local highs in the range, the higher the likelihood that this eventually breaks out. That's just the way it is, right? So you're rooting for consolidation up here. You're rooting for evidence to the market that the range is over. So thus far, I don't think we've seen great evidence for that, right? Because you can say, well, you know, we haven't made a higher high yet. We haven't made an all-time high yet. We haven't done well against, we haven't broken out against QQQ yet, right? You can use all of these things in the argument, and you can say, yeah, but, right? It's to the point eventually where we get to a place that there's no more evidence against us anymore, right? So the risk reward is huge here because not everybody's in this idea yet. But we're getting there. We're getting there. All right, that's all I got for this one. Give me a like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'll see you guys on Sunday for Setup Sunday. And stay excited out there for what is potentially to come, because we look good. We look good. That's all I got for this one. Thanks, guys.